It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Before we get into all of the stuff that I got for today, big news for our friends out in Minneapolis, St. Paul, listening on KTNF AM 950, the progressive voice of Minneapolis, of Minnesota. Workers in St. Paul at the Starbucks there, 300 Snelling store, 14-1 victory at Starbucks. Good on the Starbucks Workers United there for their victory. This is now 14 states with a unionized Starbucks. I'm going to have to start drinking coffee, I think, at some point. If this continues, good on you guys. Congrats. Now on to the next step, moving this along. Just had to throw that out there. And please, by all means, keep up the great work. Let us know what's going on. Let's get into it. The big story for me, Deutsche Bank predicting major recession. And I saw this, and there's a bunch of stories kind of popping up, one right after the other, business journals, business people saying, bad stuff. And it's coming back to the Federal Reserve going to be raising your interest rates because, hey, cheap money, we're used to it, we're hooked, kind of. What Deutsche Bank is saying is they fear that the Fed is going to raise interest rates too aggressively. They're going to slam on the brakes, going to hurt the economy a bit too quickly, and that is going to cause what they're saying is a major recession. They say, look, inflation's probably already peaked. We're already probably down the other side. And I'm not an economist, but you got to think once the supply chain issues start to work themselves out, once people start spending money in other directions, once we start figuring some of the other stuff out, and we start holding some of the right people accountable, I think some of it's going to come back down. My fear, you get a Fed who with both feet slams on the brakes, turns the car sideways, we end up in the middle of the intersection, massive pile up, and then they go, look what Joe Biden did! Yeah. Now, Marty Walsh, Secretary of Labor, tweeted out today, fact, the strongest economic growth in almost 40 years powered by Joe Biden. Yeah, Joe Biden did this. And the American Rescue Plan has put the deficit on track to drop by more than $1.3 trillion this year. As he pointed out, the largest ever one-year decline. And what I thought was interesting is one of the people in his feed, and this is where I think Democrats, again, got to get a little bit better at this Twitter stuff, at this social media stuff, because it was great information. Need the graphic to go with it, because someone threw a graphic with it that showed during Republican years, those deficits grow. During Democratic administrations, they go down. And they went back, to the H.W. Bush years. Those deficits grew. Clinton came in, down, to where we had a surplus. When George W. Bush took over, massive surplus. And the first thing they did is they fretted it away. They handed it off to the millionaires and billionaires. Well, we didn't have many billionaires yet, but that was coming because we gave them massive tax cuts. Massive. And we went on a drunken spending spree and deficits galore. And then, of course, there was the W collapse of the economy in 2008. And with a TARP and with all of that came massive deficits during the Obama years, which after Obama's first year, you saw them steadily decline. And Obama handed off a reasonably strong economy to Trump. And what'd they do? More tax cuts for the very wealthy. And what happened? More increased in deficits. And then, of course, the pandemic that they boogered up from the beginning and skyrocketing. Highest deficit in history. Now Biden has dropped that down by a record 1.3 trillion. Will you see some idiot with a Biden sticker going, "Boy, Joe Biden did that"? No, you're not going to. But the reality is he did. Now, I find it interesting because you're never going to see the corporate-controlled for-profit media give Biden credit for anything on the economy. You're never going to see any credit go to the Democrats for this because, look, corporate America doesn't want Democratic policies to work. They were happy right where things were. Hands both right at 10-2 on the steering wheel. Although my son tells me now that we're doing driving, it's actually moved to 9-3. I'm not sure with the time shift, but 10-2 is what it used to be. They had hands both on the wheel, firmly planted. They were firmly in the driver's seat, and they were happy with that. Neoliberal trade policies, tax code that benefits them, deregulating everything. They in complete control, had unions quiet, hushed, under control, workers beaten down. They liked it. They're a little concerned with this worker empowerment stuff. People saying, you know what, we deserve better wages, hours, conditions. We deserve, I don't know, a little of the wealth that our labor creates. We've earned it after all. So when I saw this Politico article that headline, growing alarm over outlook for Biden economy sparks new market rout. They go and they start talking to some CEOs we're concerned. We don't know where things are going. Oh my goodness. Almost sky's falling. Oh my gosh. Chicken Little, sky's falling. And go back to Jamie Dimon because everyone goes to Jamie Dimon for bad advice. And what it seems to me is they're prepping us. They're getting us ready because the recession may be coming, and they got to have it in place on who we're going to blame. Because the blame game is what's important politically. And the corporate-controlled media understands that. So the blame is going to have to go towards, obviously, Democratic policies. Because, you gave those people $1,400. Maybe giving people money was a bad idea. Feeding their kids and keeping them in their homes and helping them pay their bills. Maybe that was a bad idea. Maybe we should have let them suffer and kick them to the curb. Maybe they should have had to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They're actually saying this stuff. I'm not making this up. There's actually a move right now of saying, maybe it wasn't such a good idea. They're claiming that $1,400 that Biden gave out, that's what all this inflation's about. Because it gave people money to go spend, which is ridiculous. I'm sorry, that $1,400 was burnt up long ago. The problem that we have right now, very clear, and we're going to get into that. It's corporate America. They're robbing us blind. Now, the Brookings Institute, they put out a study. And this is one of those studies that, if you listen to this show, I've talked about this before. We know this, but it's one of those studies you go, yeah, okay. It's what we've talked about. It's titled The Profits and the Pandemic. As shareholder wealth soared, workers were left behind. And you don't even really need to read the whole study to know what it's about. Rich people got richer. And then there's the other side of it. Poor people, not so much. What I did find interesting is they started off their executive summary reminding us, taking us back into the Wayback Machine, all the way back, way back to August of 2019. I know most of our minds don't go back pre-pandemic, but August of 19 was an interesting time. Well, for me anyway, because I do remember all of our nation's captains of industry, all of the titans of corporate individualism, all of our oligarchs getting together at their little round table, the business round table, coming together, all 181 of the largest, most prosperous, most profitable, most influential CEOs in the country, and saying, you know what? We're going to do business differently. We've been doing it almost wrong all along. We now care about consumers. We now care about workers. We now care about the environment. We care about society. We care. we shouldn't care so much about shareholders. Yeah, it's for the last 40 years, it's all about maximizing shareholder wealth. Yeah, it's all about me and getting rich, and greed is good. And the one who dies with the most toys wins. Yeah, it's been that, but no, trust us. Trust us. Checks in the mail. Trust us. We're going to be different now. And I remember all the news stories at the time. Corporate America is going to be different. Oh, they promised. They've changed their ways. They've seen their evil ways. And they've pledged. They have pledged with their left hand over where they think their heart is on the other side. That they're going to be different. So, perfect opportunity to show this kind of grinchy, heart growing 3 times kind of opportunity, right? You would think there's an opportunity. The heart has grown 3 sides. In fact, it went from where it's supposed to all the way over where do they believe it was. So this is the great opportunity. They put out the statement. I'm sure they remembered it. They signed it, or most of them did. And what Brookings came out with is they looked at 22 big companies, the leaders in their industry. You know, the Home Depots, the UPSs, the Best Buys, the Amazons, the Hiltons, the Krogers, down the list, the leaders of their industries. And what they found, not shocking or anything like that, that they were, well, more likely to, enrich the already rich than actually give anything to their workers. In fact, the 22 corporations collectively accumulated $1.5 trillion in additional wealth for their shareholders between January of 2020 and October of 2021. Extra 1.5 extra T, extra trillion and a half. While the workers saw an additional, 2%. So the people who showed up every work, remember, the heroes, the frontline heroes, the essential workers, the people who suffered through the pandemic, the people who went and, suffered and died, the almost 1 million people who died from this pandemic, the folks who were, forced to go in because, hey, you're essential, they got less than 2% of a benefit out of all this. And yet the people who sat home and said, yeah, you go, you're a hero, thank you, $1.5 trillion. And what we find out from the breakdown of this, and Brookings did this for us, more than 70% of the wealth generated for our investor class, over $800 billion, benefited the richest 5%. For the bottom half of us, do you know how much we got? The working class, you, me, the folks down at the bottom, we saw a whopping 1%. 1%. So those frontline heroes, those people were going, thank goodness you got us through this. Thanks for delivering this stuff. Thanks for making sure that our food supply was here. Thanks for taking care of us. Thanks for, showing up at the hospitals and showing up at the clinics and doing all the work. Thank you, truck drivers and delivery drivers. Thank you. You know what you got? You got bupkis. And yet, well, our billionaire class, they did well. 13 billionaire founders and heirs of 7 companies saw their wealth grow by over $160 billion, more than 12 times all the additional pay for more than 3 million workers, according to Brookings. And the CEOs, the 22 CEOs of these major companies, they earned nearly $500 million in realized compensation, averaging more than $22 million apiece. $22 million. And you go, explain that to me. How is it possible? Now, Brookings came out and said, look, bottom line is, what did we learn? We learned that companies don't care about their workers. All that nonsense about, we care about workers, we care about shareholders, we care about our customers. Nonsense. They care about the shareholders. Because when push came to shove, they enriched their shareholders, they screwed their workers. That's what it is. Comes down to the numbers. $1.5 trillion richer to the shareholders, 2% to the workers. I'm surprised they got 2%. The workers lost jobs, lost opportunities, and corporate executives, they line their pockets. This is, which side are you on? Are you on the side of the investor class and capital? Or are you on the side of the working class and getting screwed? This is a classic moment in that. And also, this is a moment where corporate America exercised their power. They sided with the shareholders over the workers. They chose profit over people, and they aggressively crushed workers' opportunities to fight back and really try and fight for better wages, hours, conditions. Because even during the pandemic, they were crushing workers organizing. Are we surprised by any of this? No. But get ready for what's coming. Because when they do crash our economy, because we finally wake up that they're gouging us, when we finally start to hold them accountable and they do what they're going to do, they're going to turn on and blame us. Oh, it's because you were greedy, you wanted higher wages. We can't put up with that. We've got to stand up, stand together, and fight back and really hold them accountable. When we come back, I'm going to ask the question, are you sick and tired of all of this inflation nonsense? And who are we blaming? The Guardian's got an interesting piece I think we want to talk about on the other side. Going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Indigenous people have been saying that we feel a shift in the climate for decades. Climate change is here. The time is now to pass the torch on to the next generation of clean energy warriors. We need to put the land back to work for our people. That means creating jobs for them to live and thrive in our communities. The time is now. Congress must invest in clean energy.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the Guardian's got a piece on just the inflation issue and who really is soaking you and who's really responsible. Now, again, the right wants you to believe it's all Joe Biden. Joe Biden gave those poor people money, and those poor people are running out and spending it frivolously on things that you should have, and that's raising the cost of things. That's what they're telling you. You know, because those poor people shouldn't be able to buy food. That's your food. They're raising the price of your food, and it's costing you more. That's really what they're telling you. But according to this piece, titled Revealed, Top U.S. Corporations Raising Prices on Americans Even as Profits Surge. And look, we've been saying that for weeks now. Profits better than they've been since the 1950s. And in fact, they've pointed out, as I have pointed out, that their profit margins are, like in the 35% range. They're doing well. But no, Rick, it's not that they're really reaping the benefits. It's just because they're selling more. It's volume. No, it's volume, and they've raised prices. That's the big part of it. They point out, whenever you talk about inflation, they go, well, where's the inflation from? Well, it's from food, it's from energy prices, and it's from commodities. It's from the inputs into things. So you look at steel, for instance. Steel Dynamics, their profits went up 809%. 809%. You go, well, gee, how'd that happen? Well, it just happened, It was luck. You tripped, fell, scooped up 809% profit. Chevron, gas prices through the roof. 240% spike in profit. The best 2-quarter period the company has ever seen. But again, it's not gouging. No, it was an accident. Oops. This isn't greedy opportunism. No, it's not that. Fertilizer giant Nutrien. Their profits shot up about $1.2 billion on higher selling prices, according to The Guardian. Nike, their 53% profit increase driven by what? Oh, yeah, higher prices. Keurig Dr. Pepper, significant price action and productivity outpaced inflationary costs. What their profit jump up? Oh, that's right, 83%. And you can go down the list. Oil, rubber, timber, meat, wheat, steel, mining, all of these places. Record profit increases. Again, oops, it was an accident. And the reality is what we're witnessing right before our very eyes. And I've had people who, Rick, you don't talk enough about inflation. No, I don't talk about inflation in the way the right wants me to talk about it. I'm not blaming workers for demanding better wages, hours, and conditions. I'm not demanding people for trying to keep up to be able to continue their standard of living. What we are living through right now is a massive, enormous redistribution of wealth from poor and working class people, again, to business owners and the very wealthy. That's what we are living through. This is from workers, you and me, to shareholders and investment firms. This is what they are doing. Because why? They can. And we have a government that is doing nothing to them. This is where massive tax rates on windfall profits have to happen. And the other side of this, something I've been talking about for weeks, for years. We hear my conservative friends talking about, we need competition in the market. And I agree. Where are my conservative voices saying we need competition? The problem is we have very little competition when you look at what's going on. Most industries have a handful of giant corporations who control entire industries. Consolidation is pervasive throughout our entire country. And yet, Hershey, for instance, they've got 30 candy companies that control almost half of the candy market. Candy prices are up 7.6%. Profits up really well, too. Grain, 90% of the grain market, 4 companies. Archer Daniel Midland, 55% profit jump. You got 3 companies that own 73% of the cereal market. Profits through the roof. You go, gee, how'd that happen? Well, we've been asleep at the switch. We've allowed corporate America to buy up and by the big fish buying up the little fish. And what happens? Workers lose jobs. Because synergy. Need to get excess redundancy. And what happens? Workers lose jobs, shareholders pocket the difference. Again, redistribution of wealth on a massive scale from you and me to them. And it's got to stop. Just my thoughts. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of the program, podcast, you know where to get it, thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your podcast. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, some of the big stories of the day. Reed Galen's going to be here to share some thoughts. Back after this.
As Vladimir Putin wages war, oil companies are making billions by price gouging us at the pump, and Republicans are helping them do it. They took millions from big oil and blocked a clean energy plan that will lower costs for families. They're leaving us dependent on oil and at the mercy of foreign dictators. Congressional Republicans in the pockets of big oil against American-made clean energy. It all means higher profits for oil companies and higher gas prices for us.
It doesn't matter what kind of weather. It doesn't matter what time of day or night. When Mother Nature's done her worst, the only thing that matters to us is keeping the lights on for you. the hardworking women and men of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, dedicated to keeping the power on in communities all across the country. Because when bad weather strikes, we know what matters most. IBEW, the power professionals.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Reed, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
Had an interesting moment right there. I sat here, I'm looking at where we are in this moment, and you saw this this story with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and the whole 9 yards. I've just done the dumbest thing I've ever done. I had that whole introduction without having the microphone on. I've never done that before.
Well, if it makes you feel better, Rick, most times people ask me to turn my microphone off. So,
no, this is so for those who are just now getting to hear me. The story went like this. The Independent reported Lauren Boebert was in a meeting with my Congressman Scott Perry, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Jim Jordan, and they were talking about the what to do to get Mike Pence to decide what to do on January 6th. Again, for me, this is another one of those smoking gun moments where, yeah, we knew. What are we going to do about it? That becomes the question.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that, one thing that you noted, Rick, when you had the mic off, was that CPAC had rated each of these people 100% conservative. Rick, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And what's interesting about that before we get to January 6th is that under any other normal expression of what conservatism is, these people aren't conservatives. CPAC is not a conservative organization anymore, right? This used to be something that Ronald Reagan and Republican presidents attended regularly as a sort of sop to the faithful, right? Republican faithful. And to be in the old days, Rick, you could be a conservative and you could be a Republican. They weren't necessarily the same thing. And you could be a conservative Republican. Now, to be quote unquote conservative is really not to be either conservative or Republican, but to be anti-liberal. And in every sense of that word, anti-big L liberal, anti-small L liberal, anti-liberalism, which means, free thought, open elections, a free society, all of those things. And so the fact that anybody thinks that in the Republican Party that I grew up, Rick, that Marjorie Taylor Greene is a conservative, just tells you how far that party has fallen and how much further, frankly, it needs to fall this November and beyond.
Yeah, that's the reason I brought it up, because, I wanted to make the connection between, what happened on January 6th and because Lauren Boebert's someone who was tweeting where Nancy Pelosi's location was as the insurrection was happening. And CPAC, which used to have some core values, now rating Boebert and Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene as 100% conservative. And I'm going, there's just this loss in value, and maybe I'm just not understanding where the markers are anymore and what conservatism really is anymore.
Well, I don't think anybody knows, and anybody that tells you they do know is either holding on, grasping at straws for a past that A, either no longer exists or B, never existed, or is in the same line with these people, which is, again, conservatism is morphing into a white Christian nationalist worldview. It's not a surprise that the two leaders of this movement, and Rick, it's more than a political party, it is a movement, are Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson, two people who, one, Trump was never been a conservative, right? He was always in New York, whatever. And Tucker Carlson was a moderate Republican at best back in the day. Now they are both fans of Vladimir Putin. Neither one of them has decried him as we see the horrors over in Ukraine. They continue to back insane candidates. They continue to espouse a belief system that is foreign, I think, to most Americans, but is catnip to millions. And I think it's a very dangerous time, and we should not underestimate that they are relentless and they are well funded and they will not stop.
No, and that's the scary part in all this. They're not going to stop, and I see the movements happening, and I look at the right. I look at what is becoming the conservative movement, and this the economic populism, the hyper nationalism, and these ultra conservative, not conservative, these ultra. I'm not going to go.
I
guess
you call them right wingers.
These ultra puritanical values, not just conservative, but puritanical values of hatred and pure. I mean, it's a scary worldview that they hold. I think
it is, and I think that I've started to think about this as you see the stuff that these people that you mentioned espouse. Well, like I said, what Trump and Tucker espouse, what you see Ron DeSantis in Florida doing, or Greg Abbott in Texas doing. And, I really think it comes down to a couple of things. They think that everybody is stupid and they are smart. They want you to be poor, right? Because authoritarian systems, Rick, don't produce broad-based economic benefit. They do not. They produce an oligarchical society where about 15 people in the country do well and everybody else is scraping to go by. And they want your kids stupid, which is why I think they fundamentally hate public education. And so they want you poor so that you always have to go back to them, and they want your kids stupid because they think that the stupider your kids are, the more vulnerable they'll be to their stuff. And I think this is not new news, right, Rick? We've seen this many times in the last century. We're seeing it in some places now, in places like Hungary and Turkey. Thankfully, it was beaten back in a place like France. But the one thing that is I think uniform about when these movements take power is that there were more than enough people to stop it. There were more than enough people that knew that this was not okay. And the problem is that they either say, well, it's not really that bad, it'll be fine, or I'm afraid that if I put up a fight, whatever happens will be worse. And let me be clear, Rick, history shows that if you wait around because you're afraid that something worse will happen, you'll get that worse thing. Right. It's like saying, the doctor found this lump. It'll be fine. Right. Like it'll be fine. Is it ever fine? It's not.
Now you're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. You can follow them at Twitter at Project Lincoln, lincolnproject.com, the website. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at the work that they do. And I look at this as there's a corporate agenda to this, and we're starting to see some of the corporate money coming back. In fact, the story today was Toyota has been, I guess, continuing to fund Republicans who were spreading the big lie. Because you remember after January 6th, a bunch of companies were like, oh, no, we're going to back out. They started, stopping funding this stuff. They're coming back. They're going back to funding this. And I'm curious your thoughts. Did it really stop? Or is it now okay because, well, the narrative is shifted a little bit? I'm curious how you see it.
So, with Toyota, they got caught doing this last summer. And that's when we first went after them. We did television ads in New York and North Texas where they're headquartered. We geofenced with digital ads their 30 top dealerships. And Rick, within 6 hours, they cried uncle. They said, okay, we'll stop. They got caught again. A guy named Judd Legum, who writes a thing called Popular Information, tracks this stuff very closely, found that they had given to 6 of these people in March. And we said, you did it again. Now, Rick, in my earlier days, I did plenty of corporate PR. And what you have to understand is most corporate C-suites, right, the executive offices and their PR firms just say, ride it out. They won't notice. This time next year, no one will pay attention. And what we are saying to Toyota and others, is you are on notice. You are going to be held to account. And Rick, it's just like this, right? There are 20 different kinds of sedans. There's 6 different kinds of pickup trucks. There's 8 different kinds of SUVs. You don't have to buy a Toyota, right? You can buy a GM, you can buy a Ford, you can buy whatever brand you want. And so, this is one where we see with consumer companies, they take it very seriously because their brand is everything. And we know that, there are oil companies out there that do this, right, to the tune of millions and millions of dollars, not surprisingly, to Republicans. There's a company, International Paper, that gives to these people, also still operating in Russia, right? So there's a lot of these folks who are fine with how things are going because the system works for them. The problem is it doesn't work for the other 319 million Americans.
It's something, and this is where the power of the consumer is important. But here's the thing. I mean, I look at this, and the big lie still is with us, and it's one of these moments where you've got to be holding, not just these companies, but these politicians accountable. And I look at the text messages from Mark Meadows that are now out there, and again, I don't think that there's much in there that we didn't know, as happened. It's just now in writing that we see it. And it's one of these moments where either Trump's lying or he tried to overthrow the government. I mean, it's right here in writing, or am I missing something?
No, well, Rick, it's both. He's lying and he tried to overthrow the government.
Okay.
But I would also say this, the thing about the text messages, and this is what you'll hear, Senator Mike Lee in Utah, where I live, right? I was doing everything by the book, right? I wanted a legal outlet. I thought that there were things that needed to be studied. But what he's not saying, well, remember that Mike Lee's also a guy who pointed Sidney Powell and John Eastman to the White House, right? Like, these people didn't just appear out of thin air. Mike Lee said, you should really talk to these people. But what his actions did, and what the actions of all these people, from Meadows at the top to, Matt and Mercedes Schlapp, to all of these folks, is they were active participants in getting Trump's head to continue the fiction that he had won. And so it's like, oh, well, we didn't tell him to storm the Capitol. We didn't tell him this. We didn't tell him that. No, but you knew it was a lie. It's a lie now. And you encouraged him to pursue avenues you knew were wrong, you knew were fallacies, because you were hoping that it might just work. And if it didn't, well, no harm, no foul, because there won't be any sanction. There won't be any consequences. And Rick, you're right. So far, there really haven't been.
No, and this is where I blame a lot of people, and I keep going to the Democrats. What's taken so long? Merrick Garland, what's taken so long? We still got that Mueller report laying around. There's still plenty of opportunities to hold people accountable, and the longer we drag this out and cross the I's and dot the T's and put periods here and do all the other stuff that you got to do backwards or forward, the narrative keeps rolling down the line that it wasn't that big of a deal because we're not holding anybody accountable.
Well, and this is where, Rick, my friends in the Democratic Party are fundamentally uncomfortable with political spectacle, right? Whereas Republicans, it is their stock in trade.
Right.
I use, for example, the Benghazi hearings, which they dragged out for 3 years for the express purpose of driving down Hillary Clinton's approval ratings when they knew she'd run for president. They will do that again in office. What we have tried to tell our friends in the Democratic Party and, on the January 6th Commission is you must make this big. You must do it in prime time. You must drag these people behind these tables. If they don't show, right, all the better, right? But they have to do it. They have to do it big, and they have to do it loud. I think there's also a lot of Democrats in Congress, like I talked about, well, we're afraid that if we do this, they'll do it to us. Hey, you know what? Newsflash, they're going to do it to you.
They're going to do it anyway. They're already saying they're going to do it.
It's going to happen. And then there are Democrats who are like, well, we have Build Back Better, and we have the policy agenda and all that other stuff. Like, if the democracy dies, none of that stuff matters, Rick. None of that stuff ever gets done. And so there's this old way of thinking like, oh, it's not really that bad. People won't care. People do care. People do care. When you have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who basically perjured herself this week in an administrative hearing about whether or not she can appear on the ballot under the 14th Amendment, Section 3, they have a text saying, tell the president, ask the president whether or not he should put down martial law. Like, that is a seditious act against the American people after a free and fair election. And so, these people who say, oh, I didn't really do anything, they're lying. They're all lying. They're not just complicit. They were explicit in their efforts.
Yeah, but she didn't actually mean martial law. She meant Thurgood martial law.
Right. I would say, Rick, if you asked her 100 times who Thurgood Marshall was, she would not be able to answer any of them.
I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm pointing out the fact that she misspelled martial law.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
I had to throw that out there. Because, again, I go back to my defense of not wanting her thrown off the education committee. This would have been a perfect opportunity to go, as a country, we need to increase the education budget. Because again, we've got a sitting congresswoman who doesn't know how to spell martial law. Finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on the, Kevin McCarthy had a statement on the leaked tapes. A defense finally. You buying it?
No, not at all. I've known Kevin McCarthy a long time, since I lived in California. I've known his top guys. This is a guy who was trying, when he thought that Trump was going to go down in flames, right? He was making sure that he was on the right side of that play. Liz Cheney's on that phone call with him, right? Now, because he realizes that he's been caught, Rick, he's just flat out lying. He was speaking to a bunch of kids in his hometown of Bakersfield, California, and he just flat out lied. And I think, that's also what the Republican Party, the currency of the Republican Party is not money, it's lies, because you have to tell the lies. You have to be, faithful to the orthodoxy. And so, now you've got Tucker Carlson after him. You've got Elise Stefanik is out there, who's now the number 3 person in that, that leadership, who's, I guarantee you, eyeballing that. Then you've got a guy named Steve Scalise, who's the number 2 guy, who's a man without a country. He's not Kevin McCarthy. He's not Elise Stefanik. He's not true establishment. He's not MAGA. He's not a national name, and he's not a fundraiser. Like, this is a guy who very well, he'll keep his seat probably, but will be out of a job this time next year. But Rick, what you're going to see is more of this, whether or not it's through tapes like this, and I think there will be, Lordy, there will be more tapes or more text messages. The Republican Party is predicated on the idea that they all hate each other. They hate each other, Rick, more than they hate Democrats, because they all want to be in charge. And they all see it as zero sum. If I'm winning, you're losing, and that's a good thing. But if you're winning, by definition, I'm losing. And I must win, and I'll do anything I can to raise this ladder. And we've seen this everywhere, right? This is not a new phenomenon in human history. And so I think that, and here's the other thing too. Even if if the Republicans win the House and McCarthy becomes Speaker, like it wouldn't be different than if Jim Jordan was Speaker. The same bad things are going to happen. Jim Jordan would do them gleefully because he believes in that stuff. And McCarthy will do it because he knows he has to, or they'll throw him out. So, he's a paper tiger.
So it's going to be an interesting couple of years if they take power, because the rats will be jumping around and they're going to be leaking on each other, because there are more text messages. I'm sure there are more leaked audios to come. So at least it'll be entertaining.
Well, let's hope that they don't burn the ship down while they're screwing around looking for the iceberg.
Yeah, while democracy is dying, at least you'll have something to be entertained by. But right. Reed, I appreciate the time. Good talk with you, man.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Make sure you check out the work they do, lincolnproject.com. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
It doesn't happen like we think it does. No one rolls the tanks. No armies meet in pitched battle. It happens quietly, little by little. And because so many think it can't happen, it does happen. Little by little, the rules change. It doesn't seem shocking or sudden. And that's the point. Fewer places to vote, longer lines. Don't worry, they say. We're just improving the system. They hope we won't notice the rules are changing because they lost the last election. They hope we just won't care enough to stop them. They believe they can take America away from us, and we won't even notice. We know who they are. We know what they want. The question is, who are we? Do we let them get away with it, or do we fight? Democracy is on the ballot. Vote while your vote still counts. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I gotta tell you, I just did the dumbest thing I've ever done, and I've been doing this, 17 years now? That's the first time I left the microphone off while talking. Wow. I feel stupid. It is what it is. Speaking of stupid, evidently there was a deposition today, or a report of a deposition that Trump was part of, a sworn deposition. There's some newly released excerpts from Trump for an upcoming trial in New York, where evidently the killer fruits, dangerous fruits out there. Evidently, Trump was afraid that people were going to throw tomatoes at him at one of the rallies, and that was where you knocked a what out of them came from. He'll pay for whatever. It turns out he's afraid of not just tomatoes, but also pineapples and bananas. Yeah. Yeah, he's afraid of fruit. He said it's dangerous stuff. You can get killed with those things. I guess it's wherever you put them. I want to read the rest of that deposition because I read through the whole transcript that they released, and it's chaotic. The way the guy's mind works and the way he answers questions, just chaotic, and then always comes back to praising himself. It was a great rally. I was amazing. Incredible. Interesting tidbits real quick before we wrap up the hour. Biden and the administration talking about doing something on student loans and student debt, and the Republicans coming around the idea of no. This going to be an interesting moment because you've got Senate Minority Whip John Thune and a group of Republican senators going, no. They're going to introduce a bill to ban the president from doing anything on student debt. This is a which side are you on moment. This is something that could get young people to go, wait a second. We're suffering out here. The president's going to throw us a lifeline, and the Republican Party's going to throw us under the bus. Yeah. How do you think he got under the bus in the first place? It's these guys. Now, Mitt Romney, he's gone after Biden. He's calling it a bribe. He's calling debt forgiveness a bribe for voters. And you go, no, this is answering a problem that a generation has that, well, people like you, Mittens, caused. Now, remember, Mittens is one of those guys that I didn't raise any taxes, but did raise fees and costs on the working class. Education, one of those. So for me, I'm looking at this and I'm going, I think Biden has to do something. I think politically he needs it, but it's the right thing to do because we've screwed a generation over. And as I talked about yesterday, I've got a young relative who's like $100,000 in debt to end up getting a job that's going to probably pay like $25 an hour because she needs the license to get the job. And it's crazy, but we've walked away from higher ed funding. We've walked away from that kind of investment because you need skin in the game, right? Crazy stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Hopefully I've got the microphone on this time. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
I've been driving buses for 5 years, and my day-to-day routine is I wake up a little earlier than most people. I get on a bus, I go out, I pick up some students and make sure they get to school nice and safe. Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, that can be a challenge because of the winter weather and the icy roads. But I love the job. So the Teamsters are great. They provide us a lot of protections. They've always taken care of their people, made sure that our jobs were secure. We didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd have a job from day to day.
And that's amazing because before we'd be working 4, 6, 8 hours a day and only earning minimum wage was real difficult to make a living. Then the Teamsters pushed the law so we make something we can live off of and not have to have a second job. What absolutely gives me peace of mind, the union membership allows me to focus on this job without having to worry about whether or not my family is going to be taken care of. I'm Andrew Case, and I'm proud to be Teamsters Local 959.
Calling all builders. Your country is calling you. Tackling climate change is the job of our lifetime. It's time to build back better. Let's get to work.
I had an acquaintance who passed away on the job years ago. Didn't pass away. He was killed. He got into a truck crash and died right there on I-81 South, right before the Midway exit. Nobody knows how. Nobody knows why. There are a bunch of speculations, bunch of thoughts. But he left a wife and like 8 kids behind, and it was horribly tragic. And it was one of those things that you never forget. And as somebody who has been an advocate for workers' rights for so long, and look, it can happen in any environment, but statistically, reality-wise, it happens more often in non-union workplaces than it does in union workplaces. That's the reality. And you go, well, why is that the reality? Well, truthfully, the reality is it's because of people who are going to stand up and say, no, I don't think I'm going to climb down in that hole. I don't think I'm going to go 8. He had to be, this video we saw, this guy had to be at least 18 feet underground, no more than shoulder width wide, like a bucket of the backhoe wide, with a shovel digging down. I'm going, there is no way you're getting me down in that hole without the protection you need. And there's nobody. I'm going, why is there no one going, hey, get out of there? But this is, I don't know if he didn't think, I don't know what it was, but all it takes is one oops. You weren't getting that poor guy out of there. And, sometimes, we're in a hurry. Sometimes we're being pushed. And, the stories that I've heard over the years, especially when you're talking about low wage workers, especially when you're talking about undocumented workers, especially when you're talking about, folks who aren't empowered, people who are desperate, which is why we need to have laws and we need to have a much more robust OSHA, why we need to have a much more activist OSHA to ensure that people are safe. Because look, and this is where it's always interesting to me that people say, well, the companies are going to police themselves. Are they? What we've done in this country, life is cheap. Someone dies on the job, it's a small fine. Okay, it's a mild hassle. But for that family, it's devastating. For that family, it's the breadwinner gone. Now, granted, it's not the 1890s. It's not the company town where the coal boss is bringing the broken, bloody body back on the flatbed and throwing the bones against the door. Hey, here's your eviction notice. It's not that anymore. We're much more civilized than that now. It's like, with strikes, we're no longer shooting people in tents. We're no longer sending thugs out with clubs to beat you on the picket line. No. We've got lawyers in $1,000 suits with briefcases who are going to try and starve you out. We're much more civilized today. We're much better about how we starve you out and try and harm you. This is where solidarity, this is where coming together, this is where standing shoulder to shoulder and watching out for each other. This is where being each other's advocate is so important. This is where your brother's keeper. So important. And as I've said, I've always had the empowerment of knowing that if something wasn't right, I'm going to make it right. Because it does me no good. There's that old phrase, the old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. You think, hey, I'm going to cut this corner because, hey, my immediate supervisor's giving me some grief because I got to get this done, and I'm going to get this, and then, oops, something bad happens. You get hurt, someone else gets hurt, and then it's your fault. It's time to take this stuff seriously, and that's why this Workers' Memorial Day, again, the hope is always, as every Workers' Memorial Day, we remember those who lost their lives. We remember those who were harmed. And then we commit to make sure that the future is going to be better. We commit to make sure that it's not going to happen to us. It's not going to happen to our loved ones. It's not going to happen in the future. That's what we commit to do. And we work really hard to ensure that that actually does happen. And then we fight like hell for the living. Mother Jones. We'll end on a Mother Jones. Mourn the dead, but fight like hell for the living. That's where we'll end. If you missed any of today's program, make sure you download the podcast. Always there, always available anywhere you get your podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. Always there for your entertainment. Also, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Had a bunch to get to, didn't. I'll get to them tomorrow. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.